America is about to quietly lose over half of its independent cattle producers over the next couple decades, and the crazy part is it's happening while farmers are making more money than they ever have before. Hi, my name is Henry. I've worked for the two largest meat producers in the world, as well as Walmart, the largest retailer in the world, and I also have a degree in agriculture, and I'm now a full-time farmer in Northwest Arkansas. I think there are some very real warning signs happening in the beef industry right now. But to better understand my two theories, you first have to understand how the beef industry actually works. At the very beginning, you have what's called the cow-calf producers. These are your local ranchers and farmers raising calves on pasture. Once the calves are old enough, they typically go to your local sale barn. And at the sale barn, there are usually two types of buyers. The first are backgrounders, and the second are feedlots. Once they leave the feedlots, they are going to the packers. And you know these companies, Tyson, JBS, Cargill. These companies harvest and process the cattle into boxed beef that eventually ends up at your local grocery store or restaurant. Now here's the problem and the bottleneck nobody's really talking about. The U.S. cattle herd is currently sitting near the lowest levels we've seen in the last 75 years. And if you remember anything from economics, supply and demand directly affect price. There's simply not enough cattle right now, which means the small independent producers, the cow-calf guys at the very beginning of the chain, is getting paid more per calf than they've ever made in their entire life. And honestly, good for them, good for us. But here's where it gets really interesting. Who does that hurt the most? The packers. Big four companies that control somewhat around 80 to 85% of the beef processed in America. And right now, they are getting squeezed. They're paying record prices for cattle while consumers are also pushing back against them on record beef prices at the grocery store. And these companies cannot continue to operate in the red forever. So now we need to take a trip down memory lane because history already showed us what can happen in livestock production. The hog industry. Back in the 70s and 80s, there were independent hog farmers everywhere across America, thousands of them. And they were making strong money. But the integrators came in. The large companies realized they could scale production, control genetics, control feed, control contracts, and dominate processing. And slowly, independent producers disappeared. You can zoom in on some of these slides. And like you've heard, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. Which brings me to my first theory, the integrator buyout. The average American farmer today is pushing nearly 60 years old, and a lot of these ranchers have kids that simply do not want to take over the operation. They don't want the risk, they don't want the lifestyle, and they don't want the volatility. So what happens? A lot of these older producers eventually sell cattle right now for the highest they've ever been, and just run hay or lease out the ground that they already own. Then eventually, over time, the land changes hands. Land prices are continuing to rise, and the only group that can truly afford massive expansion at scale are the large corporations and investing groups. If those corporations buy the land, they already have the infrastructure on it, the fence, the pasture, corrals, and the watering system. Now they just need labor. So instead of independent ranchers owning cattle, you end up with contracted herd managers growing cattle for corporations, much like the chicken industry as it is today. That's theory number one. Theory number two is what I call the government backstop. And honestly, this one might sound a little crazy now, but hear me out. Consumers are already getting hammered at the grocery store. $7, $10, $12 pound ground beef. You can't take that much longer. And at some point, high prices become political. And with food affordability becoming political, government steps in. Now combine that with the fact that some of these large packers have already been under pressure financially because cattle prices are so high. Go look at Tyson's earning release that just came out. My theory is that eventually you could see some form of government support, subsidies, incentives, or market stabilization program designed to keep beef prices low for consumers. And the problem is once government money enters into a market like that, it rarely leaves because now these companies are too big to fail. We've heard that one before. And over time, that could accelerate consolidation even more. More leverage for larger corporations, less leverage for smaller producers, and eventually less competitive market overall. Now, look, I'm not saying that this is guaranteed to happen. These are just theories. And I think in the next 10 to 20 years in the cattle industry are going to fundamentally reshape what independent agriculture looks like in America. So I genuinely want to know what y'all think. Am I completely wrong? Do you agree? What do you think is going to happen next? So comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.